Hi, good morning, everyone. Magandang umaga if you're from the Philippines. And muchas gracias for joining us today. It's a beautiful day today in Singapore, and hopefully it's also a beautiful and sunny day in your places, in your countries. And thank you so much for joining us in this exciting event today. My name is Willy Renandia, and I'm honored to be assisting the British Council Indonesia in organizing a series of webinars with a broad theme, ELT today, English language teaching today, opportunities and challenges. Altogether, we have 4 webinar sessions. The first one took place last week. Very interesting topic last week. It's on teaching multimodal literacy, and very well attended and also very well received. And today we are going to be focusing on a different topic, very relevant and very exciting topic. Is about how teachers can help their students to improve on their language proficiency using extensive reading and extensive listening. Just to give you a heads up, next week we have another very interesting, very exciting webinar. And the title is Task-Based and Project-Based Learning in English Language Teaching. And the speakers are Professor Rod Ellis from Curtin University and Professor Francisca Yvonne. And the last webinar in the series, the last Saturday in March, the topic will be on teaching written communication skills. And we have invited excellent scholars to share their thoughts with you about the teaching of written communication skills. Professor I.C. Lee from Chinese University of Hong Kong, and also Professor Ken Hyland from the UK. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start today's session, let me just share with you some reminders, some housekeeping matters. The session is being recorded and live streamed on the British Council Indonesia's YouTube channel. And another point to remember is this: if you want to ask questions, and we do encourage you to ask questions, please use the Q&A box if you are watching from Zoom, and use the chat section of YouTube in order to share your questions with us. And at the end of today's session, you'll be able to provide us with feedback so that we can do a better job next time. And that is also the time when you'll be able to download your e-certificate and also the PowerPoint presentation materials from the 2 presenters today. Ladies and gentlemen, please sit back and relax. And I'm now inviting my moderator, Yusefa Iswandari, to begin the session today. Yusefa.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Willy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yusefa Aryani Iswandari, and I am from the English Language Education Study Program, Sanata Dharma University, Yogyakarta, Indonesia. It's an honor for me to be here today and to be the moderator of the first speaker, our beloved Professor Willy Renandia, or many of us call him Pak Willy. Although I'm sure all of us know him well, but let me still introduce him. Okay, so Professor Willy Renandia is a language teacher educator with extensive teaching experience in Asia. He currently teaches applied linguistics courses at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. He has given more than 100 keynote presentations at international ELT conferences and has published extensively in the area of second language education. His publications include Language Teaching Methodology, an anthology of current practice, 2002, Cambridge University Press, and Student-Centered Cooperative Learning, 2019, Springer International. He maintains a large teacher professional development forum called Teacher Voices in Facebook. So if you haven't joined the forum, just go to your Facebook and type Teacher Voices Professional Development. So Professor Willy's presentation today will be about improving proficiency using extensive reading and listening. So ladies and gentlemen, Please join me in welcoming Professor Willy Renandia.
Thank you so much, Josefa. It's always good to see you on the screen. And it's also good to see Rob Waring, my good friend from Japan, and also another colleague who will be moderating the next session, Ajahn Ming Sawasdipon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to be sharing some interesting ideas about the teaching of language, about the teaching of English as a second language or as a foreign language. And in particular, I'll be focusing on what we can do as a teacher to help our students develop a higher level of proficiency in the language that they are studying. But first off, before I share my thoughts with you, let me just say it again. My university is a very good university, a vibrant university located in Singapore. It's called Nanyang Technological University. And I belong to the School of Education, and locally it's called the National Institute of Education, one and the only one in Singapore. And we have a range of courses. I would like to invite you to come and consider our School of Education for your graduate studies. If you are from Indonesia, I think you can apply for the prestigious LPDP scholarship. And if you're successful, then you may want to consider coming to study with us at the university. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start off with a quiz. If you have been teaching for many, many years, I'm sure just you like me have been asking this one big question. And this is one big question that I've been asking for many, many years. And today, I think I know the answer. What is the best way to teach a second language? I've been trying to find the answer, and I think I've now found the answer. Now, here is one answer. I'd like to quote, to share with you a quote from a book, Teaching Readers of English. And the quote actually is very, very relevant for our discussion today. And this is what they say in the quote. I'm going to read this very carefully so that we can share the same enthusiasm and passion with me about this one teaching approach, which has been said to be universally hailed as beneficial. The keyword here is beneficial and universally beneficial. So it's everywhere, globally, important and necessary, and yet it is so underutilized and even ignored. And what is the name of that approach? Josefa, please say extensive reading.
Extensive reading.
Very good. Listening. Yes, that's the answer. Extensive reading. And because today's topic is on extensive reading and listening, I think we have to mention both, yeah, extensive reading and listening. And later I'll share with you why both extensive reading and listening. If you're looking for other people who share the same views, now these are some of the people that I know very well. The first one is the lady who is moderating my session today. The second lady is also a very well-known person in Japan, and she's been doing a lot of good things, encouraging teachers to implement extensive reading in their teaching. The two gentlemen there, they've done a lot of work, and their work has been a big inspiration to me, especially when they say that extensive reading is very, very good for you, for the students, and for any other people who are interested in learning, in developing proficiency in a new language that they are studying or they are learning. I have to mention this young man, this good-looking young man. I think the name is Rob Waring, and he happens to be here today with us. He will also be telling you a lot of things about extensive reading later on, yeah?
Looking a bit older now.
So you'll be listening to a lot of things, a lot of ideas about extensive reading from me and also from Rob Waring. But the key thing to remember is this. This is the most important takeaway of today's session. Extensive reading and listening is good for you, teachers. It's also good for your students. Extensive reading is probably the best way to help our students to acquire, to extend, and to also maintain their language proficiency over time. Essentially, there are two things that I want to share with you. Number one is the what and why of extensive reading and listening, the theory and the research that supports it. And point number two, I want to share with you some potential applications of extensive reading and listening in our teaching, in your teaching. And after that, discussions, questions and answers from you, which Rob and I will be addressing at the very end of today's presentation or today's session. Let's begin the first one, the theory and the research, the what and the why of extensive reading and listening. Let's begin with the what first. What is extensive reading and listening? I'm going to describe extensive reading and listening in a way that is different from what we normally understand when we teach reading and listening in the classroom. Yeah? Here's the first point. Extensive reading and listening is reading and listening for pleasure, reading and listening for recreation. This is often not the kind of things that we do in our typical listening lessons or reading lessons. So the key word to remember is something that is pleasurable, something that is recreational is good for your students. And number two, when the students do read and listen, they're doing it for, just to get the general ideas about what, the text is about. Very big, very broad ideas. If they want to, they can try to remember some of the details, but they don't have to. So this is not very much like what normally happens in the classroom, where the students, after they listen to a very short text, after they read a short text, they need to spend a lot of time trying to understand, to read, to find out every single details in the text that they're listening to or they're reading. And finally, another important point, pleasure reading, recreational reading and listening, extensive reading and listening is not for study purposes. But surprisingly, students who read a great deal, students who listen a great deal will never be advantaged when it comes to examinations, when it comes to, us assessing their English language proficiency. So there's an important, positive side effect of doing a lot of recreational reading and also pleasure reading and listening. A few more things about extensive reading and listening in terms of the text, in terms of the content of the text, of the listening text and the reading text. Point number one, very important to remember, the text materials, the reading materials, the listening materials will have to be very interesting, will have to be compelling. The kind of things that you want to, that happens when you read the first line or the second line or the first paragraph of a reading passage and you want to continue until you get to the end. So that is the kind of things that I have in mind when I say compelling, interesting, very, very exciting stuff. Number two, content is important, but the second consideration is that the language, the text, the grammar, the vocabulary will have to be accessible. It has to be at the student's level. Slightly above the student's level is okay, slightly, but not too much. A little below the student's level is also okay, especially when you work with students who have very little experience in listening, in understanding the language. That is perfectly okay. And number three, another important point. Unlike the typical reading and listening lessons that we do in the classroom, extensive reading and listening is very, very student-centered. We want to empower the students to make choices. We want to give them the flexibility and the freedom to choose what they want to read and listen. And if that happens, we can expect our students to read more and to listen more. And eventually, we'll be able to see our students reading and listening in massive quantity. The research is very clear when the students do a great deal of listening and reading. I think chances are very high that they will be able to develop a higher level of proficiency in the language. Let me just continue a little bit. This is one quote that I've seen in the professional literature. I can't remember the name of the book. What the researchers say is this, that language input through listening and reading is the sine qua non of language learning. Sine qua non means is a prerequisite, it's a precondition. Without sufficient input, I don't think the students will be able to, improve on their language proficiency. And this input usually comes in the form of reading and listening. In other words, we can acquire language from reading, and we can also acquire language from listening. And if we do both listening and reading on a regular basis, I think chances are higher that we'll be able to develop, a higher proficiency, overall proficiency in the language. Let me take it one step further and look at what exactly students get from doing a lot of reading and listening. There are three major benefits. The first one, obviously, is a linguistic benefit, language learning benefits that you get from doing a lot of reading and listening. As you can guess, doing a lot of reading and listening will help students improve their word knowledge, their vocabulary knowledge. Again, research is very clear that word knowledge is one of the most important predictors of one's ability to speak, to write, and to understand the language. Without sufficient vocabulary, it's very difficult for you to read, understand, and use language for communicative purposes. Your grammar also tends to increase as well. Now, this is a special kind of grammar that your students will be able to develop over time. This is known as implicit grammar. I have a lot more to say about the implicit grammar of the language a bit later on. Another important benefit is this cognitive benefits. Students' knowledge of the world is likely to increase a great deal after they have spent 1 year, for example, reading a variety of texts, on a variety of topics. Their knowledge about places, their knowledge about history, their knowledge about travels, their knowledge about many other things. And again, we know from research that knowledge is important for comprehension purposes. It is not possible for you to understand a piece of text written in a specific context unless you know the context, unless you know the topic very well. Yeah. And these two combinations, word and world knowledge, will help our students in thinking about their reading and listening, and also in responding to important comprehension questions that teachers usually ask. And finally, remember, extensive reading and listening is about having pleasure, having a lot of enjoyment, having a lot of fun. So not surprisingly, the last benefit has to do with the feeling, the motivation, the will, the determination, and the excitement of learning. So we can expect all these three major benefits if you do a good job providing students with the right kind of materials. And if you are doing a good job motivating your students in doing this, I think chances are very high that the students will be able to, to enjoy all these wonderful benefits that are very important in language learning. In other words, after a period of time, we can expect our students to develop their fluency in comprehension. And this fluency very easily will lead to improvement in students' ability to comprehend, to understand information that is presented in speaking and also in writing. Maybe, all these benefits are from the professional literature, from people like Rob and me, and from other experts in applied linguistics or in English language teaching areas. But if you ask people, people who have had real experience in writing and reading, like this person, a novelist who has written a lot of best-selling novels, this is what she says about the benefits of reading. And I'm going to read to you this very, very nice quote: read 1,000 books. Is she exaggerating when she says read 1,000 books? I don't think so. 1,000 books is almost nothing if you are willing to spend the time doing it, not in one day, but maybe over a period of time. Read 1,000 books and your words will flow like a river. Now, this person does not use the word fluency or any other fancy words associated with language learning, but this person uses a very easy word like flow. Now, flow means fluency, yeah? Your ability to use language effortlessly, and that is what flow is all about. Extremely important concept in language learning. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to increased fluency and comprehension, are there any other bonuses? Yes, now here is the bonus. Again, this is something that I've experienced myself and I've seen from the professional literature, and also from my conversations with a lot of teachers, in the region and in some other places. Students who have become fluent readers after doing a lot of reading and listening, they're more likely to develop a higher writing skills. In the same way, students who have done a lot of listening are very, very likely to become better, more sophisticated speakers as well. It is from listening, it is from doing regular listening that you develop the ability to pronounce words clearly and accurately and with flair, if you like. Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits associated with extensive reading and extensive listening. At this point, let me share with you a quote from one of the big guys here in language education, Stephen Krashen. Yeah, clearly he mentions the connection between reading and writing. Now, this is what he says. When enough reading is done, let me say that one more time. When enough reading is done, enough reading doesn't mean reading one whole week. That's not enough, yeah? That means reading a lot of materials over a period of time. When enough reading is done, all the necessary grammatical structures and discourse rules for writing will automatically be presented to the writer in sufficient quantity. I think this is something that we all need to remember. If you want to help your students to write better, to write well, I think the very first step you need to do is to provide students with enough reading. What about the connection between speaking and listening? I'm going to follow exactly what Krashen says, and I will exactly copy what he said and turn what he said into something like this. When enough listening is done, I think the same thing is likely to happen because the listeners will have heard a lot of grammatical structures, discourse rules, and other language rules. And gradually, eventually, they'll be able to make use of these rules, these conventions, when they try to express themselves orally in speaking. Getting a bit more complicated now, but not very complicated. Now, this is a very, very simple representation or simple model of how language learning happens from input to all the way to output, from listening and reading all the way to students being able to produce the language for speaking and writing. Let's begin with the last one here. Our job, one of our most important jobs is to help our students to become more capable in expressing themselves orally and in writing. We want them to become good users of the language. In order for that to happen, I think from our discussion today, we know that input is a sine qua non of language acquisition. So whether you like it or not, they have to do this. They have to do sufficient, enough, or Rob will use the word massive. They have to do massive listening and reading over a period of time. But not any kind of reading, not all reading or listening will be useful. Now, this is the kind of reading and listening that is easy, that is pleasurable, that is enjoyable, and that is available on a regular basis, frequency, daily, weekly basis, and also in large quantity. If that happens, I'm very sure that students will acquire the linguistic system of the new language that they are learning. Now, the big question for us is this: what does it look like when you say that they have acquired the linguistic system? What does it look like? Does it look like this? The system that you have in your head that allows you to produce language spontaneously, effortlessly, fluently, accurately, and things like that. Does it comprise hundreds and hundreds of grammar and discourse rules? Yusefa, please answer. Please say no.
No, but we
Very good. That's a very good answer. Yes, no. The answer is yes. There may be a few grammar rules or discourse rules that you learn explicitly, from your teachers. But the majority of these grammar and discourse rules are not explicit. They are very, very implicit. Now, here is another quote for you that I want to share with you. It's a very important quote from two second language acquisition researchers. Yeah, just pay attention to the bolded text. The system that we have in our head as a result of doing a lot of listening and reading over a period of time. Number one, is very complex. Can you describe this complex system? Yes, a little bit. Very, very little. What about the grammar books that provide you with like hundreds and hundreds of grammar rules? That is just barely the scratching the surface of this complex grammatical system that we have in our head that enables us to use the language for real communication. Point number two is that this system is implicit, largely implicit, largely intuitive. When you are able to say that, hey, this sentence doesn't sound right, you are making use of that implicit language. Of course, occasionally as a language teacher, you are able to put your fingers on okay, there's a subject-verb agreement problem, there's a noun clause problem, probably you can say that, yeah. But for real purposes of language learning and language using, I don't think there is a need for the students to acquire a lot of explicit linguistic knowledge or grammar knowledge of the language. And what are the sources of this complex, abstract, and implicit system? It's the language input. So that's why I mentioned early on that this input is a sine qua non of language learning, of language acquisition. Now here is another quote. This one is easier to understand, yeah? And hopefully you will remember this. I have memorized this line, so every time I am giving a presentation, I will cite this quote. It's a very nice quote. And nobody disagrees, actually. Nobody who have had a lot of experience teaching and are familiar with the professional literature will agree with this statement. I mean, read this very carefully. The ability to produce language, to speak and to write. That is to produce language relatively easily. That means fluently, accurately, and also effortlessly, for communicative purposes, not for exam purposes. Remember this, not for exam purposes, draws heavily on implicit knowledge, not on explicit knowledge. I'm not saying explicit knowledge is not important. It is, but the role it plays in language learning is not as much as we believe it does. Let me share with you a case study, a very, very interesting case study that was done some years back. Now, the case study examines what some of the most successful English language learners in China did before they became very good users of the language. So we are looking at those kids, high school students who are very good, who are winners of national English language competition. So these people are really, really very good, because in China, we are talking about millions of people out there. So if you win, at the national level, then you must have been able to compete with, thousands and thousands of other competitors. And when they were interviewed, they said this very clearly: I spent many hours. Doing what? Doing grammar exercises? Yosefa, please say no. Doing grammar exercises? No. Doing a lot of grammar drills? No. Listening to teachers' explanation of the grammar rules? Please say no. They do, but they're not really understanding the explanation of the teachers. This is what they did. They listen again and again and again. So listening again, reading again is what extensive reading and extensive listening is all about. Now, here are some quotes from the students who were interviewed by the researcher. This is what they say. I think you will also have experienced this, at the early, phase of your language learning experience. I was slow in the beginning and I had to listen to it many more times. Surprise, surprise, no surprise. That's what usually happens. And I gradually developed some feel for the language. Remember the word feel here? Intuition, implicit knowledge. That is what it is all about. Yeah. Of course, this student doesn't know the word implicit knowledge of the language. That term is, the kind of term that people in academia uses. I feel that I just have countless patterns sort of swimming around in my head. Patterns. Lines from movies often naturally pop out. Again, questions. What are these patterns? Grammar, vocabulary, or both? Ajahn Ming, grammar, vocabulary, or both? Please say both.
Both.
Yes, both grammar and vocabulary together. Ladies and gentlemen, we often do things separately. We teach grammar separately, we teach vocabulary separately, but the research is telling us very clearly that if you want your students to be able to use language for real communicative purposes, then I think we need to teach them both together, and we need to get the students to experience, to be exposed to a lot of examples of how these patterns are encountered in their reading and in their listening. In the professional literature, now these patterns are referred to as lexical chunks, lexical bundles, or fixed expressions, or idioms sometimes. Now here are some examples of these idioms or fixed expressions or lexical bundles. Make do with it. Another example, I'm so sorry, let me make it up to you next time. You can make fun of me all you want, but wait until I get back to you with revenge. The good news made my day. Please make up my mind. Now, I'm going to ask Josefa here some questions. Josefa, how about this? Can you say make your homework? Please say no.
No.
No, you can't say that. Is there any reason why we can't say make your homework? Unfortunately, there's no reason. We can only use our intuition to say that doesn't sound right. People usually say, do your homework, right? Yes, do your homework. Another example, do the bed. Josefa, can you say do the bed? No, you can't. You have to say make the bed, right? Can you say make the dishes? No, you can't. You have to say do the dishes. Why? There's no reason. English is very strange. There's no reason. You simply have to acquire the whole string of words, the whole patterns, just like that. Here's another one. COVID time. Have you been in near contact or in close contact with people who tested positive? Interestingly, people don't say near contact. It's not wrong. I think we understand the meaning of near contact, but the fixed expression, the combination, the word combination is usually in close contact with other people. Now, here are some other examples here that I have here on my screen. Yeah, this one is on me. It was lovely to see you. And there are hundreds, thousands and thousands of these expressions that we use on a regular basis in speaking, in casual conversations. In the same way, in written, language, we get to see patterns that keep appearing again and again and again. And these are known as lexical bundles or lexical chunks. And these are things that we acquire quite naturally when we are doing a lot of reading and listening. Ladies and gentlemen, let me share with you some of the people that I've seen, that I've met, who have developed a very high level of proficiency in the language by doing a lot of reading and doing a lot of listening. Yeah, some of these kids, wonderful, wonderful kids. Yeah, they develop a very high level of proficiency, including this teacher from Indonesia. She enjoyed watching a lot of movies when she was younger. Even now, she watches a lot of movies, and also this teacher as well from Indonesia. Both speak English very, very fluently and very, very well. I would like to share a quote from this teacher from Vietnam, whom I met a few years ago. And I still remember what she said to me when I talked to her, when I interviewed her, when I asked her, how come your English was so good? And she said very clearly, because I did a lot of reading. What's the big deal about doing a lot of reading? And this is what she said. Wow, this is really, really, really very impressive to me. Reading makes reading easier, and reading makes writing easier as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I have about 5 minutes to share with you some classroom applications. First off, if you're doing a lot of teaching, if you're teaching language, then the first thing you need to do when you teach reading and listening is to increase the amount of reading and listening in the classroom. And if possible, hopefully also outside the classroom. Time spent on reading, time spent on listening. Remember what I said earlier on. The quantity of reading and listening, or the quantity of language input, is what enables students eventually to build this linguistic system, this complex linguistic system. this implicit linguistic system, which later allows them to produce the language for communicative purposes. If you do that, then you'll have to reduce the other activities that you normally do in the classroom. Yeah, other activities may be very interesting, may be very motivating, but I think you need to reduce the amount of these activities and give students a lot more opportunities to do a lot more listening and reading in the classroom and outside the classroom. Here is my favorite quiz. Look at these two pictures, Josefa, picture number 1 or picture number 2. In which of the two classes students are likely to do a lot more reading? First picture or the second picture? In the first picture, the students are doing a lot of exercises there, reading exercises. In the second picture, I think you can tell very immediately. Which one? Picture number 1 or number 2? Please say number 2.
Number 2.
Yes, picture number 2. The kids are actually doing a lot of reading, and that is a very good thing. And I would like to see a lot more teachers, giving students a lot more opportunities to do a lot more reading and listening. Point number 2, ladies and gentlemen, please remember this. Yeah, it is okay for you to use slightly difficult or sometimes challenging materials, sometimes, but most of the time, I think you should be using this easier and more enjoyable reading and listening materials. When students do this, they are more likely to do more reading and more listening, either inside or outside the classroom. Think about tasks that promote more listening and more reading, both in class and outside the classroom. So in addition to your usual comprehension questions, I think you need to think about other tasks and other enjoyable activities that will get students to be more excited about continuing their reading after the class is finished. Yeah. In other words, we want our students to be doing a lot of this and not just doing a lot of drills, a lot of exercises, a lot of practice. Remember what I said earlier on, listening and reading are the best source of language development. Next one. I think if you've been teaching for a while and if you've been using course books on reading and listening, you will have seen that these course books contain a lot of suggestions that we should be teaching a lot of listening strategies and reading strategies. My advice, my take on this, reading strategies, listening strategies are fine, but don't bet your life on them. They can be very useful, but yes, the cost, the source of students' development in proficiency is not learning strategies, but actually doing a lot more reading and a lot more listening. Yeah, especially not for lower proficiency students. One thing that I would like to suggest to you is this, some ideas like repeated reading and listening is very good. Reading while listening is also very good. And shadowing is also very good. If you're looking for some reference, this is a scholar from Japan, and he has written a lot about shadowing, which is an excellent, excellent way of improving one's language proficiency through doing a lot of listening and also through doing a lot of reading. And finally, very important, what is the role of the teacher? I think the role of the teacher is to be a model, to be a motivator. When you come to class, make sure that you bring a book and show your students that you are an enthusiastic reader and that you find reading really enjoyable to do. Yeah, now these are some questions that I've often heard. Well, my students don't like to read. That is actually not very true. What happens is often that students have not found the books that they really, really want to read. Now, here is a real life story. Now, this guy, when he was younger, he didn't enjoy reading at all. Until one day, his teacher walks into the classroom and shows him a book and starts reading that book to him. And he became like, wow, this is something that is very exciting. Now, these are the books that he enjoyed reading. So the moment he found the book that he wanted to read, he started reading all the titles in the series. And that's the guy who wrote the author of these books, Paul Jennings, an Australian writer. So ask your students, So do not judge your students because they may not be reading because they don't like reading, but find out what they really want to read. A colleague of mine did a big survey in Singapore, and this is what she found. Some of the titles that students really want to read, but unfortunately, many of these books are very often not available in the school library. Final observations. Yes, extensive reading and listening is good, but it's not easy. That's what I often hear people say. They will say that, well, I don't have a lot of books available. I don't have time. Does it really work? And there are a lot more concerns that teachers might have about extensive reading and listening, in particular when it comes to materials. The truth of the matter today is that materials are widely accessible and available. If you just go to the internet and look at the books that are available in this website, the Asia Foundation, you'll be able to find a lot of free reading materials for your students to read online, or they can even download and get it printed as well. Here is another one, freely available on the internet. The problem is that the stories may be a little bit too challenging for the majority of our students. And because of that, I would recommend, if you have the resources, for you to sign up for this digital library of graded readers. It's called X Reading, and this is the guy who developed the digital library. It has a lot of graded reading materials, and your students, if they sign up, they can listen and read anytime, anywhere. Remember, reading and listening can be done together. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I've now come to the end of my presentation. I've shared with you some of the most important theory and research behind extensive reading and listening and their associated benefits. And I've also shared with you some potential applications. Again, the key takeaway for you, if extensive reading and listening is good for you and your students, shouldn't we all be doing it? Free gifts for you for listening very attentively to my presentation. You can scan the QR code or just type my name in Google, and you'll be able to find a lot of resources available for free. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Josefa, back to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Willy. So let's give a big round of applause to Professor Willy. A very insightful presentation and very interesting as always. And I'm sure we learn more about extensive reading and listening from your presentation. So ladies and gentlemen, we will have the Q&A session later after the second speaker. So if you have questions to Pak Willy, you can type in the Q&A box. Okay, so now I would like to invite Ming Swasdipon to introduce the second speaker. So Ming, the time is yours.
Thank you so much to Prof. Willy and also to my co-moderator, Josefa. Sawadee ka. And good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, respected scholars, teachers, teaching practitioners, everyone who is interested in joining this session. My name is Ming Swasdipon. I am currently a PhD student from the English as an International Language or EIL program at Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. I'm also a part-time lecturer for Chulalongkorn University Language Institute, teaching English foundational courses as well. So it is my honor and my great pleasure to be one of the moderators for this session and to be here with you all today. So before I continue to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Rob Waring, let me remind you that the link for the feedback form and also for the certificate of participation will be provided to you at the end of the Q&A session. So in the meantime, please enjoy the second presentation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our second speaker is Dr. Rob Waring. Dr. Rob Waring is a professor at Notre Dame Seishin in Okayama, Japan. He is an acknowledged expert in extensive reading and vocabulary acquisition. He has published over 80 articles and has given hundreds of lectures, plenaries, and featured speaker presentations in 32 countries. He is an executive board member of the Extensive Reading Foundation, responsible for the promotion of extensive reading globally. He is also the author and the senior editor of a 6th series of graded readers by various publishers and has recently published Teaching Extensive Reading in Another Language with another author called Nation. For today, his presentation will be on managing and running an extensive reading program. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Rob Waring. Dr. Rob Waring, please.
Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon. I'm talking from Japan. Yes, I assume you can hear me okay? All right. Yes. So you'll see down here the QR code. Please feel free to download the slides. I've also put the link in the chat window. Please feel free to download that. It'll be a little bit different from the slides which you have here. I've been playing with it this morning. I've added some more things. But that's the basic thing there. So please take it home, look at it. Now you'll see that there are many slides here. This session is also being recorded. You will not have time to be able to take pictures of some of the links I'm going to give you. So please feel free, download the slides, go to the British Council Indonesia website and watch the video again slowly. I'm going to go through a lot of information very quickly. So feel free to watch it again later, slow it down on YouTube so that you can follow some of the links and things that I've put. So let's just summarize what Willie was saying. We must do extensive reading and extensive listening. And the reasons are to provide massive fluent reading practice. Students must read a lot. And we know that students need to be reading at least 1 hour to 2 hours per week. Reading or listening 1 or 2 hours per week minimum for the language benefits to really take hold. The reason we do it is to recycle important and useful words and grammar many times and to build longer term acquisition. As we will see, textbooks only basically introduce new words and introduce new grammar, but they don't really provide the depth of knowledge. So the idea of extensive reading is to consolidate and strengthen partly known language, to build reading speed, depth of knowledge, and to be enjoyable. So these are the reasons it's absolutely essential that we do it. But what is extensive reading? This is extensive reading. This is extensive reading. Yeah. So we're going to look a little bit more at this later, but the question I want to start with is, how do I integrate extensive reading into my curriculum? So first we need to understand some basic points. So which materials do we use for extensive reading? Storybooks or textbooks with exercises? Well, the answer, of course, is storybooks, or something that the students can just read as they would read as a child. So should the reading be easy or a little bit difficult? Well, of course, it should be easy. Why? Because they need to read a lot, they need to read quickly, and they need to enjoy something. Something like this would be difficult, and you would need a dictionary quite a lot. And to be honest, I don't even know some of these words. So easy. The next one, should the students be reading slow and carefully? You know, reading every line, very careful reading, or should they be reading fast and enjoyably? In extensive reading, fast and enjoyable is the way to go. So is it okay for students to use a dictionary? Well, of course they can use a dictionary if they don't understand, but only sometimes. If you're using dictionary often, then this becomes a language study activity. A language study is perfectly okay. We should be doing language study. We should be learning new words. We should be learning new grammar, but we also need to deepen and strengthen that knowledge. So we do that by reading something we can read quickly, and we don't need a dictionary. So extensive reading and listening is not about learning new things. It's about deepening and strengthening knowledge of stuff we've already met. So should the students be reading and studying the vocabulary when they read, or reading for fun? Well, this here is study reading, and this here is extensive reading. So what are some of the main features of extensive reading? Just to review, well, we need very easy books. The students usually select their own books. Why is this? Well, because they're reading at their own level. So if you have a class of 13 or 14-year-old students, you'll find that some students are better than others, and they need to read at their own level. If students are all reading the same book, then of course it's going to be too easy for some and too difficult for others. So students should select something at their own level. They have to read their fluent reading ability, something they can read without a dictionary. The aim is to build reading speed and to develop the skill of reading, not just knowledge about reading, but the skill of reading, in the same way that we practice the skill of football by playing it, the skill of driving by actually driving the car. And we need to have, teachers need to provide a wide variety of materials of various genres, various levels, so that the students can have a wide choice of materials. A lot of the reading is done out of class, but in class if you have time as well. Typically, all the reading is done in English. There's no need for translations because we're trying to practice the reading in English, fluent reading in English. If you're going from English to Bahasa Indonesia, or English to Chinese, or English to Urdu, then of course you're doing translation work, which is a study activity. In extensive reading, there should be no other language except English. And the focus is to read for comprehension and enjoyment, and to provide input for speaking and writing. And some of the activities that we do after extensive reading should promote the integration of speaking, writing, and of course, the other skills. So when we're talking about the teaching of reading, these are some of the things that we would need to do. Sometimes we need to use a course book, so we need to teach the letters. We need to maybe teach some vocabulary or some grammar, but there's a difference between the items on the left and the ones on the right. The ones on the left we might call pre-extensive reading activities. These are language building activities. The idea here is that you will build grammar, build phonics, build spelling, build this sort of language knowledge to allow for extensive reading, which is actually practicing the skill. So the items on the left really are about learning to read, whereas extensive reading is about reading to learn about people or places and so on. So the function of all of these things is preparation. We do these things to prepare for being able to read and listen in the foreign language. So how do you know, by looking at your class, if your students are doing intensive study reading or extensive reading? Well, Willie gave us a hint here with the use of this picture. On the right, the students here are probably using some kind of course book. On the left, you can see that they're reading a book, and the hint is what is in the hand. On the right, the students are doing pen work. This is therefore intensive reading. It's preparation work for extensive reading. Unfortunately, a lot of teaching of reading only is this style, and the students don't get a chance to do this style. And this is the missing piece. This is what we need to do for extensive reading and extensive listening. In the same way, for extensive listening, the student should be just listening, or listening and reading. So extensive reading is an easy thing to do. It's very, very simple. At one level, all it means is just find some good books, build a library, tell the students about the books, help them to find a level, help them to know what level their reading is, and then just watch them learn. Just sit there and just watch them as they read in your class and so on. You have to monitor their learning to make sure they're reading at the right level. You have to motivate and encourage them and do some follow-up activities. Notice here, the word teach does not appear. The word teach is not here. This is about monitoring, helping, guiding, facilitating, helping the students to learn. There's no teaching going on here. The teaching is in the pre-extensive reading. So many of you would say, are you a lazy teacher? Yes, I'm a lazy teacher. Well, if you're a lazy teacher, extensive reading is your best friend. And I mean this, of course, as a joke. But why do I say that? Because extensive reading is actually a very easy thing to do. All you need to do is to build a library, get the students to choose their books, get the students to read something, and then the reading is shared. And that's all you really need to do as an extensive reading teacher. Build the library. You only need to build the library one time. Watch the students read, monitor their reading, and then get the students to share it. It's very, very simple three-stage process. Now, it shouldn't be the only thing you do. You will need to do some teaching of vocabulary and grammar, but that's pre-extensive reading. So as a teacher, these are some things you need to check. You need to understand why make sure the students understand why they need to read extensively for fluency, for consolidation, and so on. Make sure the students are reading at the right level and they understand their books. If it's too difficult, they can put it down. Make sure they're doing enough reading, and I'm going to talk about that later. It should be several thousand words per week. Several thousand words per week. Make sure they can choose books at the right level. You make sure they're not trying something too difficult, not something too easy. And they can monitor their reading. They can think, yes, I'm understanding this, or no, I'm not understanding this. And they can then either get a new book or continue reading. You need to help them to make sure that if they face any trouble, they can come to you and say, I'm sorry, teacher, I don't understand this. Can I find a new book? Can you help me with a new book? And so on. And make sure they're actually reading, not just sitting there looking at the pictures. Make sure they are actually reading, and to keep them motivated. So these are some of the things that you'll need to do. So how do you find time for this? Well, first, you need to have books on their desks. Make sure they have a book on their desk. When there's a quiet time in class, they can just pick up the book before the class starts or while they're waiting for a teacher and so on. You can also open a reading club, assign the reading as homework, or you can flip the classroom, do the coursework at home as exercises, and actually leave time in class for reading. But your number one job as an extensive reading teacher is to speak to your course designer to get extensive reading in every class to help consolidate what they learn in their textbook. That's job number one. Go and find your course designer and to convince them why we need to do extensive reading. So the next question is, what should they read? Well, we need to make sure the books are not too difficult, make sure students understand them. If they don't understand something, they're going to read slowly. They read slowly, they don't enjoy the reading. And if they don't enjoy the reading, they're not going to read much. This bad cycle of reading is something we need to avoid. What we do need is to check they understand. If they understand better, they read faster, they enjoy their reading, and therefore they read more. And this is the kind of circle that we need to make sure students are doing. So how do we know if they're reading extensively? Well, if they can read something quickly and enjoyably with adequate comprehension, they don't need a dictionary, then they're reading extensively. They're reading extensively. READ. So you need to ask students to think about this. Can I read it quickly? Is it enjoyable? Do I understand? Do I need a dictionary, right? And if they can answer these questions, they'll be able to monitor themselves. So they should choose something using this acronym READ. Now, we need to understand when choosing materials, there's a relationship between comprehension and speed. If the reading is slow and intentional, very high effort, if students are losing comprehension and demotivating, is not a very good form of reading. If the reading is slow with some pauses, some loss of comprehension, and some frequent dictionary use, that's a bit better, but it's not perfect. But if the reading is fast, fluent, with very few pauses, high comprehension, high involvement in the story, then that's better. The first type we call reading pain. Please don't do this. This is intensive reading. It's a little bit difficult, some loss of comprehension, bit of dictionary use, that's fine. That's all pre-extensive reading. And the last one, of course, is extensive reading itself. So what kind of materials do students typically read? Well, they're usually taught to read by using a textbook, something like this. Now, your textbook may not be exactly like this, but it probably has these features. It's short, maybe 200 words. It has some difficult words. Maybe there's a dictionary there as well. Now, following that will be some exercises which are done. And this is usually the typical way that students are taught to read. So if we look at a typical textbook that students use, it looks something like this. The content is like this. Notice that we have vocabulary and functions and structure and pronunciation, reading, listening, and so on. Now, if you notice that every chapter, every unit is different vocabulary, different grammar, different vocabulary, different grammar, different vocabulary, different grammar. So what does this mean? If we look at this structure, if we see that the structure is like this, where every unit has something new, some new grammar, new vocabulary, new grammar, new vocabulary, new grammar, new vocabulary. This is the structure of these reading activities. The problem is that the language is not met enough. So what's going to happen is the knowledge is going to decrease. Because this language is not met again later, these sporting activities are not met again in Unit 8 about technology, the knowledge is only one-hit learning. And therefore, this knowledge is going to be lost over time. So we absolutely must make sure that this grammar and vocabulary in our textbook is met again and again and again systematically. So when you're choosing materials, be very careful about choosing material written for native children. These books are not simplified in any way. They're written for native children who already know 3,000 or 4,000 words before they even start to read their first book. There's no EFL syllabus. They're not written to a linguistic series, and the input is therefore random. Be careful of using this. If your students are really high level, maybe this is fine, but it's probably going to be reading pain for many students, so be careful. So what we need to do is to make sure that the grammar and vocabulary in our textbook is recycled. This grammar and vocabulary need to come in, say, level 1 books. Only this grammar and vocabulary will be met there. Students read 20, 30 books at this level before they move to the next level. In level 2, they have this grammar and vocabulary plus this grammar and vocabulary. And then at level 3, they would have the new grammar and vocabulary plus the previous things. So here, graded readers are systematically designed to build on previous knowledge. This is not random input. This is systematically controlling the grammar and controlling vocabulary, which will help build language knowledge before forgetting happens. So the books that we use for this are called graded readers, and they have different levels, as you can see here. Graded here means simplified. It does not mean school grade. So the idea is that at level 1, students would read 20 or 30 of these books. They become very good. And they then move up to the next level, 20, 30 of these books, then the next level, the next level, the next level, and systematically building on previous knowledge until in the end, they can read these native materials. But we don't start here. We start over there. So let's just show you what some of these things look like. These are some graded readers, many, many different stories of famous stories from the past or some original stories. These are some more. Here are some famous stories, fairy tales, and so on. We can also have non-fiction material. We can have comic books, and there are about 5,000 or 6,000 of these books available. But let's just quickly look at them at various levels. So this is the easiest level, and the easiest level books have, as you can see, just a few words. That's all. At the next level, we're starting to have speech, but again, just 3 or 4 lines, very highly illustrated. The next level, we increase the vocabulary and grammar. We're starting to get paragraphs now. And then we move up the level. It gets a little bit thicker. bit more difficult topics, vocabulary is a little bit harder, until eventually they're reading something that they don't need pictures. So the idea of graded readers is there are various difficulty levels, and the students go up from one level to the other. These books often also have maybe some pre-teaching vocabulary. It also, you can see the books are quite short. Some of these books have a little play at the back of them, so if you want to practice with your class. And some of them have little story reviews. And some of these books also have, for example, a CD. So this means you can also use them for extensive listening. So where do you find these materials? Well, I found a couple of websites yesterday that you may be able to buy these books. I have no commercial interest in these books, but ubuy.co.id. This one has some of the Pearson books, of the Macmillan books, and some of the Oxford books. That's one place you could buy them. This website, Mentari, also has some books, and the shop eMall has some Oxford books. So please go here and have a look to try and find these books if you can. So as I said before, it's important that they read a lot. How much reading should they do? Well, beginners need a minimum of an hour a week at their ability level before forgetting happens. Intermediates, again, need a minimum of an hour a week at their ability level. And advanced learners, they're going to need more. And the reason for this is because the advanced level learners already know a lot of language. They need to read more to find things that they do not know. So to get to the advanced level, students need to meet around 4 million words in their career. And you cannot do that by only looking at textbooks. So if we look at a typical textbook has 5,000 to 10,000 words in total, including the instruction lines, the listening activities at the back, and so on. One graded reader has between 1,500 to 5,000 words. So students are reading one book a week for a month. That's the same amount of language as one textbook in 1 year. 1 year, 1 month. So you can clearly see the more the students read and listen, the better their English is going to grow. So the next thing is, how do we build an extensive reading program? And I'm going to go through these slides rather quickly. So first, you need to understand your program. You need to ask these questions. How much time does your curriculum have? How flexible is it to introduce extensive reading? Do you want a new course? Are you going to add an existing one? How much time do you realistically have for homework? Do you have suitable materials? Do you have a budget? Do you have staff? Do you have a library? What's your borrowing system? What system are you going to put in place to check the books are coming back? And the next one, how you're going to assess it. Are you going to assess this reading or not? So you need to understand these things first. And we're not going to provide you answers necessarily, but you need to ask these questions as you're thinking about designing your program. So what would your library look like? Well, hopefully it looks something like this, with some nice bookshelves, some nice carousels, a place to read, and so on. Maybe you'll want a CD for listening, some CD packets down here. Maybe you can see what students have been advertising about what reading they've done, and some books to display in the classroom. So between classes, students can just go and look at the books anytime they want. This is how you motivate your students. Display the books for them. Don't hide them away. Put the books in front of the students, and when they have quiet time at lunch, they will pick them up. Make book displays like this, maybe on the theme of the week. So maybe your theme is about the body. Have some books put out about the body. Next week, your theme may be about the environment. Put some books out about the environment. If you don't have a library, then use a school bag, maybe a suitcase or something like this. In this way, you can just wheel the books between classes. You can put a padlock on it, put a lock on it so that people don't take your books, and just wheel the bag around from class to class. And of course, you might need 4 or 5 of these bags. And this is a nice instant library for you to carry around. Please try not to put your books like this. This is a very boring library. We can't see the covers. The students have no idea what level these books are. It's just not a useful way of displaying books. Far better is to have them in various levels. So here, this is the yellow level. You can see here the books have the yellow tag on them. These are the brown level, for example. And in this library, this is my university library, we have our brown books, yellow books, blue books, and green books. So these are various difficulty levels. And so students can just go to their color code, and all the books are just kept in their color code. That's the easiest way to manage a library. And we put color on these books here. So maybe you can see on screen here, oops, maybe you can't, but you can see that this book here has some color code on it, yeah? So you put the color codes on and tell the students what the levels are and so on, yeah? If you want, you can have some special class books, so all of the students get one copy of Love Story. You can again put them special color like this. The favorite books in our library have gold on them, so students can easily see the popular books. So if you also want to do extensive listening, you should put the book with the CD in a little packet. Put them in a packet because otherwise they get separated. You'll have the wrong CD with the wrong book, so be careful about that. Make sure the students know their level. So we have brown, yellow, and so on. And in my university, we tell them what the level is, how long the books are, what the TOEIC level would be, and so on. So make a little chart like this so students know what the level colors mean. If you want to find out more about extensive reading, you should go to the Indonesia Extensive Reading Association, and they have a very, very useful book, which is available on their website. And that's this book here I'm holding up in front of you. This is the English version of it, and it's a free download at the link I'm going to be putting into the chat window right now. So if you want to download this, it's free and available in about 12 or 14 different languages. Now, in this guide, there is a chart at the back that tells you the publisher and will tell you the level of the books. So the Cambridge readers start at this level and go to this level. The Macmillan books start at this level and go to this level. So if your students are about this level, then you can see which series at what level is the right books for your students. This is a useful guide for you. There's also a much bigger one at this link up here. So please go to this guide and you can find out which series are the right ones for your students. You're going to need to make some reading record sheets, one for the class. Here you'd have one piece of paper for your class. And what you can do is inside each book, you would put a little number like this one. Whoop, you can't quite see it, but you can see there that there's a book I've written inside this, a number I've written inside this book, and therefore you can just write the code down here and you can check which book the students have returned and not, yeah? This is one sheet for a class, and there's one for person. By the way, yes, anybody can join the FACE reading group. So you need to make a checkout sheet of some way, yeah? So what kind of activities can you do? Again, in that book that I mentioned, at the back of the book here, there's a big double page about extensive reading activities. So please check that out, yeah? There are lots and lots of extensive reading activity types, but make sure that the reading that they do is fast, easy, high comprehension. So there's not one type of extensive reading. There's no one way only. If you want to do assessment, fine. If you don't want to do assessment, fine. If you want to have tests and reports and exercises, fine. If you don't, fine, that's your class. You can either have students select the books or the teacher can select them. You can do the reading out of class or in class. You can do follow-up activities or not, and you decide what's best for you. So there's two types of assessment. There's direct and indirect. The direct assessment is where you actually give them a test, a direct assessment, if you want to do that. I don't think this is necessary. If the students are already reading at their level, then they already understand their book. You probably don't need to test them. But if you are interested in testing your students, the mreader.org website has free online quizzes. There's about 7,000 quizzes for most graded readers on this website. You tell your students to log in, they take the test, and you can check their data. So the mreader.org has lots and lots of free online quizzes for you. I'm not sure how much time I have left. Mink, could you put a thing into the chat window for me, please? Indirect assessment is another way that you can do it. Now, indirect assessment is where you ask the students to read something and then do something later. So, for example, it could be make a poster or a presentation. It could be to make a video log, make some book reports, do some discussion, do some rewriting. And these here are some activities that students would do. The students could have a self-level check to check that they understand it. I understood 80% of the book, 90% of the book. I could read it slowly and quickly, and so on and so on. 5 more minutes. Thank you, Mink. You can have a quick reading report, something like this. As I said, I'm going through these very, very quickly. Please download the slides. Please look on the YouTube, and you can copy these later, yeah? I don't have time to go and point you through every one of them, yeah? Do a picture report. The students draw pictures of the story and share that with the students. They can rewrite the story, or they can write the story from pictures, take pictures from the book itself, and then they can write the story with it, explaining what they did. They can just discuss in the classroom. They can make a presentation, something like this. So this is a presentation about the book that they read. They can do a video log. So here we have 2 video logs that these students have made. There's a boy here telling us about his story, and another one there. So again, in Indonesia, this is a ER book review on YouTube. Nida Husna has her class doing book reviews, and this is very useful. You can comment on these things. I get my students to make videos, and I get them to put them on Flipgrid. On Flipgrid, students can upload their stories, their story reviews, and people can comment on them. And you can guarantee if they have to do a Flipgrid video, therefore they're definitely going to practice and practice and practice and practice before they put the video live. So this is a way to share information. You can also ask students to make bubble stories as well. I'm just seeing that some people are wanting the link. I'm just going to put the link into the chat window again for you. You can ask students to draw the story like this. And you could ask students to rewrite the story. You can have little mini plays and so on and so on. So there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of things that you can do as a teacher. As I said, at the back of the, oh, here, students can make little bookmarks explaining the story. This is a romance, so you do a romance bookmark and so on. These little things are fun things to do, yeah? This is the book with the ER activities. Please do lots and lots and lots of these. Now, I've been talking here about the use of paper materials, books themselves, but sometimes we don't have access to books. So you can use the X-Reading website. It is a very, very good website for extensive reading. It has about 1,500 books. Willie mentioned this before. It's a pay site, but it's a very high quality site. Here are some other sites that you can use for reading online. These are paid sites. Again, please download the links, download the slide, and you can get these links there. If you want sites which are free, these are some free websites. Again, download the link. Here are some more free websites. And here are some more for listening. ELLO.org. If you do not know this site, the first thing you need to do after this presentation is go there. It is fantastic. Really, really good for listening and language focused work. Please go and have a look. ELLO.org. Now, there are good points about using free graded reading sites. The first thing is it's free and it has reading practice. However, there are some downsides too. A lot of these free sites don't have EFL materials. It's materials written for native speakers. Often there's adverts on them. The topics are not always interesting, randomly selected material. But importantly, there's no dictionary. There's no recording of student data. You don't know what the students are reading. You can't log in and record what students are doing. Teachers cannot check the answers. They're not usually professionally made. So I made a website called ercentral.com. This is completely free. The teacher can upload a class, the students can then read, and you can check this information. I'm going to type this into the website, into the thing. So this website is completely free. And what you do is you have a reading library, you choose which book that you want. There's a bit more information about it. You can then read the book and you have a dictionary lookup. It records how much reading you've been doing. After you've reading, you can take a quiz and we can take a quiz. So there's lots and lots of material there for your students. It's completely free, completely free. So there, if you go to the website, you can find out a bit more. We also have listening materials as well on this website. So what are your next steps as a teacher? I just have about 2 or 3 more slides, that's all. Your next step as a teacher. Well, first, try extensive reading with a few students. Make a reading club, for example. Get some books, get some feedback. Just start in your class to see how it goes. Don't try and put extensive reading in your whole school just yet. Just try it in your class. What works with your students? Then, when you've had a bit of experience, ask for a budget for a trial class. Go to your teachers, head teacher, go to your school board, go to your school district, and then start extensive reading in 1 or 2 classes formally. Integrate extensive reading with other classes, get other teachers involved, get the library involved. And then when you have some data, maybe do this for a year or so, and then apply for a larger program in your school or your school district, where it's not just your class, it's across the year or maybe across the whole school. So grow. Do not go too quickly with stage 2 and stage 3. Do not go too quickly with stage 2 and stage 3. Learn to make your mistakes. Learn what works, learn what doesn't work. If you go too far, too fast, too quickly, you'll find that you may do it in a wrong way and the students will fight back and you'll fail. So do it nice and slowly. Learn yourself about how to do extensive reading. Now, if you want to find out more about extensive reading, the ercentral.com area has a teacher's guide. And here we have lots and lots of resources for you to learn about extensive reading. And this is where you can register your students. You can manage your students from here. You set up your classes here. There's also the guides I just mentioned before. There's the extensive reading podcast that you can listen to. There's also a YouTube channel. The Extensive Reading Foundation has about 100 or 150 videos that you can watch, including this one down here. Here are 2 YouTube videos that I made last year for beginners. Yeah. Extensive reading basics. This is about 45 minutes long. And this is how do we do extensive reading with no money and few resources, right? So lots of information there. This is your homework, ladies and gentlemen. Also, the Indonesia Extensive Reading Association has a video area with YouTube of 50 videos of people talking about extensive reading in Indonesia. This August, there will be an international conference on extensive reading. It's online. It's called the Extensive Reading Around the World Conference, and it's available at this link here. Again, please download the slides and you can get the information. So thank you very much. There are the slides for you one more time. These are the slides, the links that you should go to. If you go to the erfoundation.org website, you can find the guides, you can find more information about graded reading, and so on, and so on, and so on. So thank you very much. I apologize for it being so quick, but please watch the video, go slowly, and then download the slides. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much to Dr. Waring for your wonderful presentation about the details of how extensive reading can be implemented, how the extensive reading section can be set up in a library, how extensive reading can be accessed, as well as for you to have provided many useful links for the ER and EL materials. Thank you so much. So
My
now, thank you. To optimize our Q&A session, we are diving into the Q&A session right away. I believe that my co-moderator, Yuseva, is already ready for the first question. I think we have time for 4 to 5 questions and quick answers. Thank you.
Okay. Ming, can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, yes, very
yes.
clearly.
Okay, good. Okay, good. All right. So I think we have the first question, Ming, and we can address to Professor Willy and Dr. Waring. Professor Willy and Dr. Waring, there is a question here. My students have nearly 0 English level. Can we do ER?
Yes, let me just respond to that question. The answer is yes, but not by asking students to read. The first thing you can do is to do a read aloud. In other words, you telling the story, you reading aloud the story to the students. And if you need to, you can get it translated into Bahasa, into the student's first language, and then you can tell the story in the target language. And that kind of read aloud is what is being done at the moment in Singapore. I think teachers in Singapore or schools in Singapore are adopting what is known as a book-based project or book-based pedagogy. But since the students are very young at the very early level of education, like primary 1, very little guys in the classroom. So what happens is the teachers are doing all the reading aloud with the students. Yeah, so the reading is done by the students initially, and gradually, of course, for some students who are already know how to do the reading, they can do it on their own. But for the other kids, I think it's going to take a while for them before they are able to read confidently on their own and independently as well. So read aloud by the teacher will be the starting point, with a lot of gestures, with a lot of pictures. And the materials have to be easy, comprehensible, and also interesting for the kids. So that will be my response to that question. So the answer is yes, we can, even at a very early stage. Remember, parents, mothers, they speak to their kids, right? So you can't ask a baby to read on their own. They can't do it yet. So it's the mother who is providing a lot of language input at the very early stage, either through their speech or reading aloud a simple, easy story to their kids.
I would say the same thing too.
Yeah.
Once the students know about 100 or 150 words, they can start to read those very, very easy books that I mentioned before. Make sure, of course, pre-extensive reading, they need to know the alphabet, they need to know a little bit of spelling, they need to know how to sound out the words, but reading with the teacher or reading aloud as a class, checking they understand, following the story, very visual materials. Yes, you can start at a very, very, very early age.
So
Thank you.
Let me proceed to the second question. I think many people have expressed concerns as to their students hate reading. What is the best way, in your opinion, to fix this problem?
Okay, 2 things. Number 1, please do not hate reading. I think the starting point should be the teachers. If students see the teachers doing a lot of reading enthusiastically, I think the students will, find joy and find motivation. Very often we start by saying, hey kids, reading is good for you, please read. Some students will actually do reading as you suggested, but many students won't do it because they don't see models, they don't see examples. So one of the best ways to motivate your students is for you to bring books into the classroom and to demonstrate to your students that you too enjoy reading and you too read on a daily basis, and you watch interesting movies as well on a regular basis, like I do. I watch a lot of Korean movies these days.
I do too.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Just
Yeah.
be a motivating teacher for yourself. The key, I think, is when we all say that students hate to read, I don't know anybody in the world who hates to read. I mean, they're reading all day long, right? all day long they're reading. The question is they don't like to read things that are not interesting. That's
exactly.
the problem, right?
Exactly.
So we need to find the interesting stuff. And we need to make sure you go to your bookstore, even take your students to the bookstore.
Yeah.
Because you have no idea what they're interested in. You know, I had a group of rugby students in one of my classes at a university I was teaching at. Rugby students, big, heavy guys, right? Some of them were sumo wrestlers, right? What did they like? Fairy stories. I couldn't guess that, right? So we don't know. Take your students to the library, take them to the bookstore, show them publishers' brochures and say, what would you like to read? And if they want to read some dark horror stuff, let them have it, because motivation trumps everything.
Anything. Yeah.
Everything. Just let them read. Even if it's a bit too difficult, they really want to read it, let them have it. That's really important. Yeah.
Okay. But Willie, as the host, do we still have time for question and answer?
Yeah, maybe another 2 or 3 questions.
Okay, 2 or 3 questions.
All right. Yeah. I think the next one is a kind of reflective question. Have we been doing the wrong things in our teaching because we don't do extensive reading and extensive listening?
This is a very tricky question. Yeah. I wouldn't say we've been doing the wrong thing, but I think we have not given enough attention to what factors actually contribute directly to language proficiency. And for many years, we've been spending a lot of time, spending a lot of money on course books, on grammar books, on time on drilling the students with grammar rules and vocabulary lists and so on and so forth. I think these things are not of little value. They can be very useful, but as Rob mentioned early on, the students need to deepen their understanding, their knowledge about these words, how these words are actually used in real context, in real conversation, in real stories and things like that. Let me say this to everyone here. Learning, like many other things, language learning, like many other things in life, is context dependent. If you learn grammar in the way you normally learn grammar in the classroom, then that is what you learn, which you can use for doing a good job in examinations because of the match between the context during the classroom lesson and also the context in which you are assessed. So there's a good match there. Yeah. But if you learn words and grammar in context, in interesting context, then you will remember, and hopefully one day you'll be able to also use that words and grammar in a similar context. When I say context, I mean a real conversation, a real story, a real debate, for example. Learning is context dependent. Right. If you learn language in context, then chances are higher that you will be able to use language in context as well. Sure. Language in context means using language for real communicative, situations. Sure. I think for many years we've been spending too much time over teaching the grammar and the vocabulary, but we haven't done a good job in providing students with opportunity to actually experience how this grammar and vocabulary is used in meaningful situations. So that would be my take on that.
Yeah. I think
have you been doing a wrong thing, Rob?
I would say that I wouldn't say we're doing the wrong thing. I think there's a couple of points here.
Yeah.
Is that the vast majority of us, when we think about a curriculum or a syllabus, we're thinking in terms of pieces. Week 1, week 2, week 3, unit 1, unit 2, unit 3. Yeah. And textbooks are designed like that for nice, easy chunks of teaching. We sort of fall into this routine of believing that if we teach the pieces, then everything will hold together. And I think the second point I want to make is that there's kind of 2 levels of learning. The first is the kind of surface initial level. That is, what's this word? What does it mean? What's this grammar? How do I use it? But to know a word, for example, you need more than just the meaning. You need to know when to use it, how to use it, what the context would be. Is it a polite word, rude word? What's the register? What other words does it live with? For example, do we say blonde hair? Do we say yellow hair? So knowing whether we say beautiful man or beautiful woman, this is not going to be taught in your textbooks. It's not in your dictionary. To be able to use the words in multiple contexts, in multiple ways, use them correctly with the correct collocation, You can only get that from experience. There's no other way. There's no other way. You have to learn how words and grammar go together and get that sense of language, that feeling of what feels right, that feeling of what feels wrong. And you can't get that from teaching. It's something that a teacher cannot teach. The student has to build that system internally, implicitly, and that can only come from experience. The first level comes from formal teaching. The second level comes from deep experience with the language.
Thank you so much for the answers. I do have one question on extensive listening. Okay. So to the presenters, can you suggest how advanced learners can improve their listening abilities in English? Because the person who posted this question doesn't think that watching movies will improve their listening skill because the students will always turn on the Bahasa subtitles. So what are your take on this?
My answer would be, if you're watching a movie, you've got the Bahasa titles on, that's a language study activity, right? Because the idea is you're focusing on the language. So you need to be able to read or listen to something at or about your level. So as Willie said before, listening again. So maybe watch it with Bahasa first, then watch it with English subtitles, and then watch it in English. Play it again, play it again. You know, as you're washing the dishes or you're out in the garden, just play it. Just let that language swim all over you. But I would be a little bit careful, the difference between movies and academic language. The same goes for books, movies as well. Movies are spoken. Therefore, it has the spoken vocabulary, which is relatively limited. There are not many middle frequency and low frequency words in movies. There ought to be high frequency spoken vocabulary. If you really want deep vocabulary, the richer middle frequency, low frequency academic words, you need to meet informational texts. Not so much novels, not so much movies. You need to watch like TED videos, and doing narrow reading and narrow listening is very important. Read in one topic area. For example, maybe you're interested in space and the stars. Just watch lots of videos on that, not random different things, but watch lots of things on one topic. That will really build your vocabulary. Then move to another one and another one and another one. You know? So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a very good suggestion. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find a real true story of how somebody learned a lot of English by watching a lot of movies, especially movie series. Who? Ming, is it? Ming is an example. And there's a guy, very well-known person in Korea, the BTS rock star, the group band leader, the one who speaks English very well. I think you would be able to see, his interview in one of the talk shows, US talk shows, where he recounted his experience exactly like what Rob said. He would watch, the movie first in Korean with Korean subtitle, and then he would watch it again. Now this time with the English subtitle, and then he would watch it again, and the third time round without any subtitle. And that is how you learn a lot of words, a lot of phrases, a lot of expressions. His spoken language is very, very good. But remember the link that I mentioned early on, listening, viewing, and speaking. Yeah, because the words that you hear in movies are spoken language. So chances are you'll be able to speak better. But writing, no, it comes usually from reading.
The problem also with movies, though, is that the subtitles don't match what's on the screen. Very often. I was watching a movie in Japanese the other day, and it was like, blah, 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 on the word said no.
Yes.
So it doesn't match carefully. But you can download the movie script as well.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I have one very last message, if you don't mind, for everybody? Today, our task has been to introduce to you extensive reading and extensive listening. And we all know that it takes time to change your curriculum to bring in extensive reading. It might take you a few weeks, a few months to find out what materials are out there, test a few things out, try it with a few students. But we hope that today our aim has been met, and our aim has been to really help you to understand what's important, why we need to do this, why we cannot avoid this. It's the glue that holds all the other language teaching that we do together. It's the glue that holds the grammar teaching, the vocabulary teaching, the reading skills, all of those things are all practiced together in this extensive reading and extensive listening. But it will take you some time to set up a course. Take your time, learn about it, watch the videos, go to some conferences, learn a little bit more, and slowly implement it. Yeah, try it out for yourself. Don't rush, because many programs fail if you don't do it quickly, if you do it too quickly. Yeah, so learn from other people and get some ideas. Yeah, but one thing I hope that will make you feel today is, for those of you who are not doing extensive reading but feel that you should be doing extensive reading, we hope that now you feel guilty.
Guilty.
Right?
As
You feel
charged.
guilty that you should now be doing it.
Mm.
So please start that process of learning more, helping other people, start a program, and just get things going. There's lots of information, lots of support out there. Please move towards ER and EL.
Thank you so much for the answers, our presenters. So I'm sad to say that we are running a little bit late, so I need to close the Q&A session. And I'm sad that we haven't got a chance to cover a lot more questions, a lot more interesting questions from the audience. So just one quick question. If you think that you would love to give extensive reading and extensive listening a chance, so please type one in the chat box and then click send. So we can see that our presenters, our presentations have convinced you that extensive reading and extensive listening is worth a try. Okay. So now it brings us to almost the conclusion of today's session. Before everything else, I think that I will need to remind you that there will be other two sessions, the one next week and the last one on the last Saturday of this month. So for the next session, session number 3, it will be on the Saturday, 19th of March, at the same time from 10 to 11:30 in the morning Jakarta time. And the session will be on task-based and project-based learning in ELT. And we have the speakers, Professor Rod Ellis and Dr. Francisca M. Yvonne. So if you're interested in the session, please don't forget to register beforehand. And for the last session that will be held on the last Saturday of this month, the Saturday of 26th of March, the session 4 will be on teaching written communication skills, but the time will be a little bit different. It will begin at 4 p.m., 4 in the evening, and it will be finished around 5:30, again, Jakarta time. And okay, I need to remind myself of what I need to inform you all. So I think that that's all. You will see shortly the link for the feedback form and also for the certificate of participation. You also see the QR code on your screen. Please complete a survey. When you completed a survey, there will be the certificate that will be customized for you. And don't worry if this screen will disappear in a minute, because it will reappear once again when a short video clip has been displayed and has been finished. So I would love to take this opportunity to thank the British Council for this wonderful event. I think if you do agree with me, this is such a fruitful, successful, and so much fun event for all of us. I'm sure that it's so much fun for the speakers, as well as for my friend Yuseva, and also for every one of you. So thank you so much for the British Council team. And I would love to thank you to our wonderful presenters, Professor Willie and Dr. Waring, for such an amazing presentations. Thank you so much. Clap, clap, clap. And thank you to Yuseva for being here with me today. It's a very nice opportunity to be working with you, and I hope you'll see each other more often in the future. Last but not least, most importantly, thank you everyone in the audience. Because of you, this session could have been such a fruitful and successful session. all of you are from every part of the world and we joined here in this session today. It is, to me, such a great event. So thank you all for participating in this event. Okay. So if you share the time zone as Thailand and Indonesia, I will have to say that have a nice lunch. For the rest of you, have a good day, have a good night, have a good evening. And in the meantime, have a good week. If you're interested in our sessions next Saturday and the Saturday after that, please don't forget to register for the sessions. Now, again, after this short video clip, you will be provided once again the feedback form link. And if you completed the form, you'll be given the certificate. Thank you all for today. It's a pleasure to be here. สวัสดีค่ะ